I was stirring a pot of soup when my daughter-in-law struck me across the head with a metal ladle. "What kind of cooking is this, you useless old woman?" Tiffany shrieked, and I felt the scalding metal sear against my temple. My son Marcus sat motionless in the living room, and all he did was reach for the remote and turn up the television volume, as if he couldn't hear, as if my suffering didn't matter. 5 minutes later, a thunderous crash erupted from the kitchen. Pots clattered, plates shattered, and my body collapsed to the floor. Marcus finally came running and froze in the doorway. "Mom, what have you done?" he whispered, staring down at me sprawled among the wreckage of my own dignity. But what neither of them knew in that moment was that I still held one final card, hidden away. A card that would change everything. My name is Eleanor Sterling, though everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 71 years old, with hands calloused from decades of kitchen work and a heart that, until recently, had foolishly placed all its faith in family loyalty. How naive I was. How utterly blind. 6 months ago, I buried my husband, Wallace. 50 years of marriage simply evaporated on an April afternoon when his heart decided to stop while he was watering the azaleas in the backyard. I found him there on his knees, the garden hose still dripping water onto his worn brown shoes. Since that day, my world became silence and yellowing photographs. I was left alone in a house that felt too large, surrounded by memories that ached to touch. Marcus, my only child, insisted I move in with him and his wife. "You can't be alone, Mom. It's dangerous at your age," he said, sounding genuinely worried over the phone. I wanted to believe him. I desperately needed to believe him. So I packed my life into 4 suitcases and left behind the house where I'd raised my son, where Wallace and I used to dance in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, where every corner held fragments of us. Marcus's house was all modern minimalism, gleaming white floors and furniture that looked straight out of an architectural magazine. Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, greeted me with a smile that looked about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Welcome, Eleanor," she said, not calling me mother or even mom. Just Eleanor, as if I were a stranger. From the very first day, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to turn back. I settled into the guest room, a cramped space at the end of the hall with a window overlooking a dark alley. I hung Wallace's photographs on the wall, arranged my modest dresses in the closet, and tried to make myself invisible. That became my new role, to exist without being a burden. The mornings started early. I was up by 6, brewing coffee, preparing breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, freshly squeezed orange juice. Marcus came down first, always rushing, always glued to his phone. "Thanks, Mom," he'd mumble without glancing up. Tiffany appeared afterward, wrapped in a silky emerald robe, her hair perfectly styled even at that hour. She'd sit down and scrutinize every detail of my work with critical eyes. "The coffee is weak," she'd complain, or "these eggs have way too much salt." Never a thank you. Never a word of appreciation. I just nodded, smiled, and tried harder the next day. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be needed. I wanted to believe I still had a place in my son's life. Days bled into weeks. I cleaned. I cooked. I did the laundry. I became a shadow, moving silently through the house, picking up crumbs, folding towels, tidying spaces no one else seemed to notice. Tiffany worked from home, always on supposedly important calls, always stressed. When something went wrong in her day, I became the easiest target. "Why did you leave this here?" she'd yell, pointing at a mug I'd forgotten on the side table. "You can't do anything right." Marcus was present for those moments, but he never said a word. He just looked away, as if it wasn't his problem. As if I wasn't his mother. There were nights I lay awake listening to the wall clock tick away the seconds. I wondered what I had done wrong, where I had failed as a mother, why my son allowed me to be treated this way. The tears fell silently onto my pillow, and I dried them before dawn because I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't give them a reason to discard me. But that afternoon, while I was preparing the vegetable beef soup that Marcus had loved so much as a boy, something inside me finally snapped. I was chopping carrots, focused on making everything perfect, when Tiffany stormed into the kitchen like a hurricane. "What are you doing?" she demanded in that sharp tone I knew all too well. "Soup for dinner," I replied softly, without turning around. "Marcus's favorite recipe." She walked closer, peered into the pot, and her face twisted in disgust. "This looks like pig slop. How much salt did you use? Are you trying to poison us?" Her words were daggers. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. She grabbed the metal ladle from the pot and, before I could react, slammed it against my head. The blow left me stunned. I felt the heat of the metal, the boiling liquid dripping down my hair, the sharp pain radiating from my temple. "Who cooks like this, you incompetent old woman?" Tiffany shouted, her voice echoing through the entire house. I stumbled, gripping the edge of the stove for support. From the living room, I heard the television. Marcus was right there. He could hear everything, and all he did was turn up the volume. That was the moment something inside me died. The physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal in that silence. My son, the boy I had carried, the child I had raised with every ounce of love I possessed, chose the sound of a television show over my suffering. I stayed there, leaning against the stove, the ladle still dripping soup at my feet. Tiffany stared at me with eyes full of contempt, waiting for me to apologize, to kneel, to beg her forgiveness for existing. But all I could think about was Marcus, how the television volume had spiked right when she screamed, how he knew exactly what was happening and chose not to see it. "You're pathetic," Tiffany spat, crossing her arms. "Look at this mess. You can't even make soup right. I don't know why Marcus insisted on bringing you here. You're a burden, a useless woman who just takes up space." Every word was a slap. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but my voice was trapped somewhere deep in my throat. I tried to clean up, wiping the soup droplets from the floor, but my hands were shaking. My head throbbed where the ladle had struck. Tiffany stormed out, and I was left alone in the steam and the silence. 5 minutes. That was all it took for me to make a decision. I looked at the pots lined up on the stove. I looked at the dishes piled in the rack. I looked at the kitchen I had cleaned every single day for months, trying to earn a place in this house that was never truly mine. And something inside me exploded. It wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. It was pure survival instinct. I grabbed the biggest pot, the one that held the soup she'd criticized, and emptied it into the sink. The hot liquid went down the drain with a sound that was almost violent. Then I grabbed another pot, and another. I dropped them, some on the floor, others against the kitchen counter. Plates slipped from my hands, cups shattered, silverware flew through the air. It was chaotic, liberating, necessary chaos. I heard Marcus's hurried footsteps. "What was that?" he yelled from the hallway. When he reached the kitchen, he stopped dead in his tracks. His face went pale seeing me there, surrounded by overturned pots, spilled soup, broken dishes. There was a thin line of blood on my temple where the ladle had struck. "Mom, what did you do?" he whispered, but he didn't come closer. He didn't touch me. He just looked at me as if I were the one to blame for everything. Tiffany appeared behind him, her look of horror quickly morphing into rage. "She's insane. Your mother is completely out of her mind," she shrieked, pointing at me like I was a dangerous animal. "Look at this mess. She destroyed my entire kitchen. Call someone. Marcus. This woman needs to be locked up." Marcus looked at me. I looked back, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, or at least to ask why I had done this. But he just shook his head, disappointed, ashamed. "Mom, why? Why do you do these things? Why?" I repeated, my voice sounding hoarse and broken. "Your wife hit me with a scalding hot ladle, Marcus. She hit me, and you turned up the television. The words came out like knives. He blinked, confused, or perhaps pretending to be confused. I didn't hear it, Mom. I didn't know. Liar. The word floated between us like poison. You were right there. You heard the whole thing, and you chose to do nothing. Tiffany stepped between us, her face red with fury. I will not tolerate this. I will not live under the same roof as this ungrateful old woman who respects nothing. Marcus, you have to choose. Either she goes or I go. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. I looked at my son, begging him with my eyes to choose me, to remember who raised him, who spent sleepless nights when he had a fever, who worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education. But Marcus stared at the floor, his hands in his pockets, defeated. I'm sorry, Mom, he finally murmured. But I think it's better if you find somewhere else to stay. This isn't working. You're causing problems. You need to leave. The world stopped. My heart stopped. Everything stopped. You're kicking me out? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Your wife hits me, and you kick me out? It's not like that, Mom. It's just that Tiffany and I need our space. You need your independence. It'll be better for everyone. He spoke in rehearsed phrases, empty words someone else had put in his mouth. My son wasn't there anymore. All that remained was a stranger with his face. When? I asked, feeling the tears start to burn behind my eyes. Tomorrow morning. I'll call you a cab. You can stay at a hotel while you find something permanent. I'll help with some of the expenses. At first, he was firing me like an employee. He didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Wallace's photographs, wondering what he would say if he could see me now. I packed my things slowly, folding each item with care, as if external order could contain the internal chaos. At dawn, I heard the cab honk. Marcus waited at the door with $200 in his hand. To get you settled, he said, unable to hold my gaze. I didn't hug him. I didn't say goodbye. I just took the money, grabbed my bags, and walked out of that house without looking back. The cab driver asked where I wanted to go. I had no answer. Just to any cheap motel, I finally said. He took me to a roadside motel with flickering neon signs and carpets that smelled like stale beer and desperation. The room cost $30 a night. I did the math in my head. With $200, I could survive less than 1 week. The motel room was small, with stained beige walls and a bed that squeaked every time I moved. The window overlooked the parking lot, where cars came and went at all hours of the night. The neon sign flashed every few seconds, bathing everything in a sickly reddish glow. I sat on that bed, and for the first time in months, I cried without holding back. They weren't silent tears. They were deep, heaving sobs that clawed their way out of a dark place in my chest. Years of accumulated pain, swallowed humiliation, words left unsaid. I cried for Wallace, who had left me alone in a world I no longer recognized. I cried for Marcus, the boy who once hugged me and called me his hero. I cried for myself, for the woman I had been, and who now didn't know who she was. When the tears dried, only emptiness remained. I looked in the bathroom mirror under the cruel fluorescent light. A 71-year-old woman stared back, deep wrinkles, swollen eyes, messy gray hair. There was a purple mark on my temple where the ladle had struck. I touched the wound gently and felt that the physical pain was almost a relief compared to the other pain, the one that had no name. The days began to blur together. I stayed in the room almost constantly, watching television without really seeing it, eating minimally. I only ventured out to buy something from the vending machine in the hall: salty crackers, instant coffee, granola bars. Once, the machine ate my last $2 without giving me anything back. I stood there watching the money disappear and felt it was a perfect metaphor for my life. I sent messages to Marcus. At first, I tried to maintain my dignity. "Son, I need to talk to you." Nothing. Then I tried to be more direct. "Marcus, I'm running out of money." Silence. Finally, I stopped trying. The messages were marked as read, but there was never a reply. It was like shouting into a bottomless well. 1 week later, the money was gone. The desk clerk, a man in his 40s with a prominent belly and tired eyes, knocked on my door. "Ma'am, I need you to pay or check out." His voice wasn't cruel, just professional, indifferent. I explained my situation. I begged for one more day. He just shook his head. "Sorry, ma'am. Rules are rules." I packed my suitcases again. For suitcases that now weighed like corpses. I dragged them across the parking lot under a scorching sun, with nowhere to go. I walked for hours. My feet ached. My hands blistered from carrying so much weight. But I kept going because stopping meant accepting that I had nowhere to land. I ended up at a small park near downtown. There were metal benches beneath the trees, pigeons pecking at crumbs, children playing on the swings. I sat on a secluded bench and watched life continue as if I didn't exist. A woman walked by with her young daughter. The little girl looked at me with curiosity, but her mother yanked her hand and quickened her pace, as if poverty were contagious. That was my first night sleeping on the street. I didn't truly sleep. I stayed sitting up, clutching my purse, startled by every noise. There were other homeless people in the park, mostly men, huddled under cardboard. One of them approached and offered me a piece of stale bread. "Eat up, Grandma. You've got to look out for yourself out here." I took the bread with trembling hands and thanked him. He nodded and walked away, dragging a bag full of cans. The days turned into a routine of survival. I looked for food in the dumpsters behind restaurants. At first, I was disgusted, ashamed. But hunger is stronger than pride. I found day-old bread, bruised fruit, scraps people had left on their plates. I ate hidden in alleys where no one could see me. There was a church a few blocks away that served soup on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I stood in line with dozens of other people, all with broken stories written on their faces. A young volunteer served me a bowl with a compassionate smile that somehow made me feel even smaller. "God bless you, ma'am," she would say. I just nodded, unable to form words. The nights were the worst, cold, long, and full of fear. I lay down on the bench with my suitcases around me, using my sweater as a blanket. I listened to sirens in the distance, occasional shouts, the constant hum of the city that never slept. I thought of Marcus lying in his comfortable bed in his heated house while I shivered under the stars. I wondered if he thought of me, if he cared, if he knew his mother was sleeping rough. One morning, a patrol officer woke me with his flashlight. "Ma'am, you can't be here. You need to move on." I explained I had nowhere to go. He sighed, tired of hearing stories like mine. "There's a shelter 6 blocks over. Go there." He gave me the address and left. I tried to go, but the shelter was full. "Come back early tomorrow," they told me. Always tomorrow. Always waiting. Never now. 2 weeks passed like that, or maybe 3. I lost count. The days blurred into a fog of exhaustion and hopelessness. My clothes were dirty, my hair greasy, my skin covered in grime. I had become one of those invisible people whom others avoid making eye contact with. A statistic. A shadow. But in the midst of all that suffering, something strange happened. I started remembering things I had forgotten. I remembered that before I married Wallace, I wanted to study literature. I remembered winning a poetry contest in school once. I remembered there was a time when I had dreams of my own, before I became a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a shadow. One afternoon, while searching through my suitcases for clean clothes, I found an envelope I didn't remember packing. It was old, yellowed, with my name written in Wallace's unmistakable handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were a letter and several folded documents. The letter began, "My dearest Ellie." I recognized immediately when he had written it. It was from 2 years ago when Wallace had been hospitalized with pneumonia. I thought it had just been a scare, but now I understood that he had faced his own mortality. "If you are reading this, it means I'm no longer with you," the letter said. "Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was alive. I always wanted to shield you from the worries of money, business, and legal complexities, but now I see it was a mistake to keep you in the dark." My eyes filled with tears as I read. Wallace's voice resonated in every word. "For the last 30 years I made investments, small at first, then larger. I bought properties when no one wanted them, in neighborhoods that later gained serious value. I saved every extra penny. I did it all thinking of our future, of your security. I never told you because I didn't want you to worry, because I wanted to surprise you in our old age with the peace of knowing you would be well cared for." My breathing quickened. I unfolded the documents that came with the letter. They were deeds, property titles, investment certificates. My eyes scanned the papers, unable to believe what I was seeing. An apartment building downtown, another one on the north side, company stocks, bank accounts with numbers that seemed impossible. My hands were shaking so much the papers nearly fell to the ground. I read each document once, twice, 3 times, trying to process the information. There were 13 properties in my name. 13. Complete buildings, apartments, commercial spaces. And one of those addresses was painfully familiar, 452 Magnolia Avenue. It was the building where Marcus and Tiffany lived. The building where they had kicked me out, where I had been humiliated, struck, and discarded like trash. It was mine. It had been mine the entire time. I felt something churning in my stomach. It wasn't just surprise. It was a mix of disbelief, hurt, and something darker that was slowly starting to grow. Wallace's letter continued on the second page. "Contact the attorney, Avery Hayes. He has all the original documents and will help you with everything. His number is at the end of this letter. Ellie, my love, never let anyone make you feel less than you are. You are a strong, capable, valuable woman. If anyone treats you wrong, remember you have the power to defend yourself. I loved you every day of my life. Take care of yourself. Wallace." I sat on that park bench, surrounded by my bags, holding proof that I wasn't the homeless woman everyone saw passing by. I owned an estate valued at approximately $10 million. $10 million. And I had been sleeping on the street, eating from the garbage, begging for crumbs. The irony was so brutal I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I did both. I laughed like a maniac while tears streamed down my dirty cheeks. Passers-by looked at me with pity or fear, steering clear of the crazy old woman in the park. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Or maybe I was. But now I knew something they didn't. I searched through my things until I found a working payphone. I dialed attorney Avery Hayes's number with shaky fingers. It rang 3 times before a professional voice answered. "Hayes and Associates Law Firm. How may I help you?" "I need to speak to attorney Avery Hayes. It's about Wallace Sterling." My voice was broken from weeks of barely using it. There was a pause. "Who is calling, please?" "It's Eleanor Sterling, Wallace's widow." Another pause, longer this time. "Mrs. Sterling, we've been trying to contact you for months. Where are you? Mr. Hayes needs to see you urgently." I gave them the address of the park. They said they would send a car in less than 30 minutes. I returned to my bench and waited, clinging to those documents as if they were the only real thing in the world. Maybe they were. The car that arrived was black, sleek, with tinted windows. The driver got out and looked at me with a neutral, professional expression, as if picking up homeless women was part of his daily routine. Mrs. Sterling? I nodded. He loaded my bags into the trunk and opened the back door for me. The interior smelled like leather and expensive air freshener. I felt dirty, out of place, but I no longer cared. The law firm was in the financial district, in one of those glass buildings that reflected the sky. We rode a silent elevator up to the 15th floor. The receptionist looked me up and down but didn't say anything, just pointed down a hallway. Attorney Hayes is waiting for you in his office. Avery Hayes was a man in his 50s with perfectly styled gray hair and thin-rimmed glasses. He stood up when I entered, and for a second I saw surprise on his face at my condition, but he quickly replaced it with a professional expression. Mrs. Sterling, please have a seat. Can I offer you water? Coffee. Water, please. My voice was barely a whisper. He poured a glass from a crystal carafe and handed it to me. I drank as if I hadn't had water in days, which, in a way, was true. Mrs. Sterling, we have been trying to locate you since Mr. Sterling passed away. We left messages at your old house. We sent letters. Your son told us you had moved out, but he didn't provide a contact address. My son. The words came out bitter. My son kicked me out of his house 3 weeks ago. I've been living on the street. The attorney frowned. I see. I am truly sorry to hear that, but I want you to know that your financial situation is very solid. Your husband was an extremely foresight man. Have you reviewed the documents he left you? I pulled the envelope from my purse and placed it on his desk. I found them yesterday. I don't understand everything they say. Avery reviewed them carefully, nodding. These are duplicates. I have the certified originals here. Allow me to explain your current situation. Mrs. Sterling, you own 13 properties in the city, valued at approximately $10 million in total. Additionally, you have investments in funds and stocks worth $2 million more. Your husband also left you 3 bank accounts with available cash of approximately $500,000. The numbers floated in the air like something unreal. $12.5 million. And I had been searching for food in dumpsters. It can't be real, I whispered. It is completely real, Mrs. Sterling. And there's something else you should know. One of the buildings you own is at 452 Magnolia Avenue. According to our records, your son Marcus Sterling and his wife Tiffany occupy apartment 301 in that building. Is that correct? I nodded slowly. That is correct. Then you should know that they have been living there under a reduced rent contract that your husband granted them 5 years ago. They pay barely $400 a month for an apartment that would be worth $2,500 in the market. It was a family favor that Mr. Sterling granted them. $400. Marcus was paying $400 to live in a luxury apartment thanks to his father's generosity, and he had thrown me out onto the street. He had left me with nothing. The attorney continued speaking, explaining details about taxes, property management, but I was barely listening. My mind was processing something else. Can I cancel that contract? I asked, interrupting him suddenly. Avery stopped and looked at me intently. You are the owner, Mrs. Sterling. You can do whatever you want with your properties. However, there are legal procedures we must follow. You can't simply kick them out without notice. I don't want to kick them out yet. The words came out cold, calculated. I want them to adjust their rent to market price, $2,500. Tell them to pay that. The attorney nodded slowly. That is within your rights. We would have to notify them 30 days in advance about the change in contract terms. Are you sure you want to proceed? Completely sure. Avery took notes on his computer. Very well. I will prepare the necessary documents. Now, Mrs. Sterling, there are more immediate matters we must attend to. Your living situation, for example. You have several options. You can move into any of your vacant properties, or I can help you find a temporary place while you decide what to do. I want to see the other buildings, all of them. I want to know exactly what I own. Of course. We can organize viewings starting tomorrow. In the meantime, allow me to arrange a hotel room for you, an appropriate place where you can rest and recover. He stood up and made a call. In minutes, everything was coordinated. A 5-star hotel downtown, an executive suite, everything paid for from my own account. Before I left, Avery handed me a bank card. This has access to one of your checking accounts. There's $50,000 available for immediate expenses. Use what you need. And Mrs. Sterling, one more thing. Your husband asked me to tell you something if you ever came to see me under difficult circumstances. He made me promise. He pulled a sealed envelope from a drawer. He told me, word for word, if my Ellie comes to you beaten down by life, give her this and tell her I always knew she was stronger than she believed. I took the envelope with hands that no longer trembled so much. I opened it right there in front of Attorney Hayes. It was another letter from Wallace, this one shorter, written in black ink on thick paper. My love, if you are reading this, it means someone hurt you enough that you sought help. I know your pride. I know how hard it is for you to ask for anything, but I want you to know one thing. I built this for you. Every property, every investment, every penny saved was with the day in mind when I would be gone and you would need to defend yourself. Do not let anyone, not even our own blood, make you feel small. You are a giant, Ellie. You always were. Now prove it. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I read. Avery had the delicacy to look away, pretending to review papers. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away with the other. Wallace had known. Somehow he had known that one day I would need this, that I would need a shield, armor, a castle of my own. The hotel was everything my life had ceased to be. Soft carpets, sheets that smelled of lavender, a bathroom with a marble tub. I stood in the middle of the suite for several minutes just looking. It seemed unreal. 24 hours ago, I was sleeping on a park bench. Now I was in a room that cost $300 a night. The first thing I did was take a bath. I filled the tub with hot water to the brim and submerged myself completely. The water turned dark with weeks of grime. I scrubbed my skin until it hurt. I washed my hair 3 times. I eliminated every trace of the street from my body. When I got out, I wrapped myself in a white robe that hung behind the door. It was so soft it almost made me cry again. I ordered room service, soup, freshly baked bread, roasted chicken, salad, dessert. When the food arrived on a cart with a white tablecloth, I sat and ate slowly, savoring every bite. It wasn't just food. It was dignity. It was power. It was proof that I still existed as something more than a shadow. That night, I slept 12 hours straight. I slept without being startled, without fear, without cold. When I woke up, the sun streamed through the curtains, and for a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then everything came back. The documents, the money, the properties, my new reality. Over the next few days, Avery took me to see each of my properties, apartment buildings, commercial spaces, even a small shopping center on the south side. Each place represented years of Wallace's quiet work, investments made with patience and vision. He explained how everything worked, the rental contracts, the maintenance, the monthly income. I listened and took notes like a dedicated student. The net income from all your properties totals approximately $45,000 a month, Avery told me one day as we reviewed reports in his office. After taxes and maintenance expenses, you're looking at an annual income of around $400,000. That was without touching the principal capital. $400,000 a year, and I had been begging for a bowl of soup at the church. The irony was still brutal. But now there was something more. A plan was forming in my mind, a cold, calculated, patient plan. Avery, I need us to make some changes, I told him one afternoon. But I need them to be done discreetly, without anyone knowing I'm the one behind it. He leaned back in his chair, intrigued. What kind of changes? First, the building on Magnolia Avenue. I want to raise my son's rent to the market price as we discussed, but I also want you to review all the other contracts in that building. If there are other special arrangements, reduced prices or favors being granted, I want everything returned to normal rates. Everyone. I want that building to operate as a real business, not a charity organization. Avery nodded and took notes. It can be done. Something else. I want to buy new clothes. I want to change my appearance. And I want a commercial name, something I can use to sign documents, to appear on contracts. I don't want anyone to know that Eleanor Sterling is the owner of all this. We can create a legal entity, an LLC. We choose the name, and all documents are signed under that name. You will be the silent beneficiary. It's perfectly legal and very common in the real estate sector. Perfect. Call it Mendoza Enterprises. Over the next 2 weeks, I transformed. I went to hair salons where they cut and colored my hair, covering the gray with an elegant chestnut brown. I went to boutiques where attentive staff helped me choose clothes that fit well and made me look like the woman of means I now was. Pearl gray dresses, pantsuits in earth tones, silk blouses in deep green. Nothing flashy, everything classy. I bought new glasses with modern frames. I got a manicure. I learned to use a little makeup to cover the deeper wrinkles. I wasn't becoming someone else. I was finding the Eleanor who had been buried beneath years of silent servitude. Avery taught me how to review financial reports, understand statements, and make business decisions. I learned quickly, discovering a part of me that had never had the opportunity to develop. I had spent 50 years cooking and cleaning, but my mind was still sharp, capable, and hungry for knowledge. You have a talent for this, Avery told me one day. Your husband chose his investments well, but you have an instinct for spotting opportunities. It comes naturally to you. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it always had. But no one had ever given me the chance to discover it. Wallace had been a good man, a loving husband, but even he had kept me ignorant about the finances, believing he was protecting me. Now I understood that true power didn't come from being protected, but from having the tools to protect myself. The rent increase notifications were sent to all the tenants in the Magnolia Avenue building, signed by Mendoza Enterprises, legally represented by the Hayes and Associates law firm. The increases were justified, they were within legal limits, but they were significant, especially for those who had been paying reduced rates for years. Avery informed me of the reactions. Some tenants called furiously, others tried to negotiate. There's one apartment in particular that has called 7 times, he told me one afternoon. Apartment 301. Marcus Sterling says he has a special contract with the previous owner, that this must be a mistake. It's not a mistake, I replied calmly. Tell him the special contract expired with the death of Mr. Wallace Sterling. Now he must pay the full rate or vacate. He's asking to speak to the owner directly. Tell him the owner is unavailable. All communications must go through you. Days passed. Avery kept me informed. Mr. Sterling is trying to get a loan to cover the new rent amount. Apparently, he and his wife are living beyond their means. They have credit card debt, a car payment. The rent increase is putting significant pressure on their finances. Good. The word came out cold, emotionless. I didn't feel satisfied exactly, but I didn't feel guilty either.